The voices outside my hospital room door were clear as crystal. How much do you think she's actually worth? That was Julian's mother, Patricia. The business alone is valued at $3 billion. Then there's the real estate portfolio, the investment accounts. Julian's voice. My fiancé. The man who'd whispered he loved me just this morning while holding my hand. And you're sure the will is updated? Patricia again. I'm working on it. She's so weak right now, she'll sign anything I put in front of her. I lay in the hospital bed, tubes running from my arms, monitors beeping steadily. My eyes were closed, but I was wide awake. I'd been awake for all of it. Every whispered conversation. Every scheming phone call. Every mercenary calculation of my worth now that I was supposedly dying. Except I wasn't dying. I wasn't even sick. 3 weeks ago, I'd found text messages on Julian's phone. Messages to a woman named Monica. Messages that spoke of love, of a future together, of just a little longer until I'm set for life. I should have confronted him then. Instead, I'd done something far more strategic. I'd hired the best actors money could buy. I'd paid off a private medical team. I'd created an entire fictional diagnosis of kidney failure, complete with stage test results, fabricated doctors' reports, and a deteriorating condition that looked devastatingly real. And then I'd watched the man I'd planned to marry reveal exactly who he was. The foundation is the tricky part, Julian continued outside my door. She's got it set up to inherit most of her assets if something happens to her before we're married. Then marry her quickly, Patricia hissed. Before she gets worse. A deathbed wedding if you have to. I'm trying, Mom. But she keeps saying she wants to wait until she's feeling better. Like that's going to happen. The cruelty in his laugh made my stomach turn. I'd known Julian for 2 years. We'd met at a charity gala where he'd seemed so different from the wealthy men who usually pursued me. He'd been charming, attentive, and seemingly uninterested in my money. He told me he was a financial consultant, made a decent living, and loved me for who I was. All lies. My private investigator had uncovered the truth. Julian was drowning in debt. He'd been fired from his last 3 jobs for embezzlement. His family was on the verge of bankruptcy. And Monica, his girlfriend of 8 months, had no idea he was engaged to someone else, let alone a billionaire. What about the kidney? Patricia asked. What about it? She needs a transplant, doesn't she? You could offer to donate. It would look good, show commitment. There was a long pause. Then Julian laughed again, that same cruel sound. Are you kidding? I'm not giving up one of my kidneys for her. She's going to be dead in 6 months anyway according to the doctors. Why would I sacrifice my health? Fair point, Patricia agreed. I opened my eyes slightly, just enough to see the gray hospital ceiling. The room was exactly as I designed it, private, sterile, convincing. Through the window I could see the city skyline. My city. The place where I'd built my company from nothing, where I'd created technology that changed industries, where I'd become one of the youngest billionaires in the country. And I'd almost thrown it all away on a man who saw me as nothing more than a bank account with a pulse. How's Monica handling your absence? Patricia asked. She thinks I'm on a business trip. I'll see her tomorrow, tell her how hard I'm working to build our future. He paused. You know, if Gabrielle would just hurry up and die, this would all be so much easier. That was it. The line that confirmed everything I'd suspected. Julian didn't love me. He never had. He was waiting for me to die so he could inherit everything I'd built. But I had news for him. I wasn't dying. And by the time I was done, he'd wish he'd never heard my name. The door opened and Julian walked in, his face immediately transforming into a mask of concern. Sweetheart, you're awake. How are you feeling? I looked at him with weak eyes, playing my role perfectly. Tired? So tired. I know, baby. I know. He sat beside the bed, taking my hand gently. The same hand that had just been gesturing outside while he discussed my death like a business transaction. The doctors say you need to rest. Build up your strength. Did they say anything else? I whispered. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Just that we need to hope for the best. That miracles happen. Miracles? Yes, they did. But not the kind he was expecting. I've been thinking, I said softly, about the wedding. Maybe we should do it soon. While I still can. His eyes lit up, actual excitement that he couldn't quite hide. Are you sure? I don't want you to strain yourself. I'm sure. I want to be your wife, Julian. Before anything happens. Of course, my love. He kissed my forehead and I felt nothing but disgust. I'll start making arrangements. Something small, just family. Nothing that will tire you out. That sounds perfect. He stayed for another hour, playing the devoted fiancé, feeding me ice chips, adjusting my pillows. Every gesture was calculated. Every word was a performance. And I watched it all with clear eyes, documenting it in my memory, adding it to the mountain of evidence I was building. When he finally left, promising to return first thing in the morning, I waited until his footsteps faded down the hallway. Then I pressed the button on the remote hidden under my blanket. Dr. Rachel Morrison entered moments later. She wasn't part of the hospital staff. She was my personal physician and one of the few people who knew the truth about my condition. How did I do? I asked, my voice returning to its normal strength. Oscar-worthy, Rachel said, checking the fake monitors we'd set up. Though I have to say, listening to that conversation outside made me want to strangle him myself. Get in line. I sat up, pulling the 4 from my arm. It wasn't connected to anything, just a prop. How much longer do you think I should maintain this? That's up to you. But Gabrielle, are you sure you want to go through with the wedding? Even a fake one? I need him to commit fully. I need him to think he's won. Then, when I pull the rug out from under him, the fall will be that much harder. Rachel nodded slowly. Just be careful. These people are clearly capable of worse than we thought. I know. That's why I'm recording everything. That's why I have security outside this room 24/7 disguised as hospital staff. And that's why Julien Laurent is about to learn the most expensive lesson of his life. I stood up, walking to the window. Out there, people were living their lives, unaware that in this room, a billionaire was staging her own death to catch a gold digger. It sounded like something out of a movie, but it was my reality now, and I was going to make sure it had the ending I deserved. 3 weeks earlier, everything had been different. I'd come home from a business trip to Singapore 2 days early, excited to surprise Julien. We'd been together for 2 years, engaged for 6 months, and I genuinely believed I'd found someone who loved me for more than my bank account. Looking back, I could see all the signs I'd missed. How he'd moved into my penthouse after just 3 months. How he'd quit his job after a year, saying he wanted to support my career by managing our household. How his family had suddenly become incredibly interested in our relationship once the engagement was announced. But love makes you blind. Or at least it had made me blind. I'd walked into the apartment that afternoon with my suitcase and a bottle of his favorite wine. The place was empty, or so I'd thought. I'd set down my bags and noticed his phone on the kitchen counter, buzzing with messages. I hadn't meant to look. I'd picked it up to bring it to him, assuming he was in the bedroom. But the screen had lit up with a notification and I'd seen the name, Monica, with a heart emoji next to it. The message preview had been enough. Can't wait to see you tonight, baby. I miss falling asleep in your arms. My hand had trembled as I'd unlocked his phone. He'd never changed the password. It was my birthday. Another thing I'd thought was sweet but now realized was just lazy deception. The messages had gone back months. 8 months to be precise. Monica was a kindergarten teacher who lived across town. Julien had told her he was a struggling entrepreneur trying to get his business off the ground. She'd sent him supportive messages, told him she didn't care about money, that she loved him for who he was. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't been devastating. But it was the messages between Julien and his family that had really opened my eyes. Group chats where they discussed my assets, my business, my investments. Messages where Patricia had sent links to articles about estate planning and inheritance law. Texts where Julien's sister had joked about being patient because the payoff will be worth it. I'd sat on my kitchen floor, scrolling through months of betrayal, and felt something inside me shift. Not break. I'd been through worse in my life. My parents had died when I was 19, leaving me with nothing but debt and determination. I'd built my company from scratch, fought off hostile takeovers, weathered recessions and market crashes. I hadn't become a billionaire by falling apart when things got difficult. So instead of breaking, I'd gotten angry. And then I'd gotten strategic. I'd called my head of security, Tom Rodriguez, a former FBI agent who'd worked for me for 5 years. Within an hour, he'd been at my apartment with his team, sweeping for bugs and setting up countermeasures. Tell me what you need, Tom had said. I need to know everything about Julien Laurent and his family. Every debt, every scheme, every secret. I need surveillance that will hold up in court. And I need a plan. By that evening, I'd had a full dossier. Julien's real financial situation was worse than I'd thought. He owed money to loan sharks. His mother had embezzled from her last employer. His father had filed for bankruptcy twice. His sister was being sued for fraud. They weren't just gold diggers. They were desperate. And desperate people were dangerous. That's when I'd had the idea. If they were waiting for me to die to get my money, I'd give them exactly what they wanted, or at least make them think I was. I'd contacted Dr. Morrison, a physician I'd known since medical school. We'd been roommates and she was one of the few people I trusted completely. She thought I was crazy at first. Gabrielle, this is insane. What if something goes wrong? Nothing will go wrong if we're careful. I need to know the truth. I need to see what he'll do when he thinks I'm dying. And then what? You miraculously recover? Then I destroy him. It had taken me a week to set everything up. I'd rented a private floor at a medical facility that catered to wealthy clients who needed discretion. I'd hired actors to play doctors and nurses. I'd created a complete medical history with test results, scans, and treatment plans that looked absolutely legitimate. The hardest part had been the acting. I'd had to gradually start looking sick. Losing weight had been easy. I'd just cut calories and hired a makeup artist to make me look gaunt. I'd practiced looking weak, moving slowly, speaking softly. And then I'd told Julian I needed to see a doctor for some concerning symptoms. He'd been so attentive at that first fake appointment, holding my hand while the actor playing Dr. Stevens had delivered the devastating news. Kidney failure, cause unknown, prognosis poor without a transplant. I'd watched Julian's face carefully. There'd been shock, yes, but underneath it I'd seen something else. Something that looked almost like calculation. How long does she have? He'd asked. With treatment, possibly 6 months to a year. With a transplant, she could live a normal life. But finding a donor is difficult, and her condition is deteriorating rapidly. Julian had pulled me close, kissed my forehead. We'll get through this, baby. I promise. Whatever you need, I'm here. Such beautiful lies. Over the next 2 weeks, I'd let my condition worsen. I'd moved into the private hospital suite. I'd had Tom install hidden cameras and microphones throughout the room and the hallways. Every conversation was being recorded. Every scheming phone call was being documented. Julian had visited daily, playing the devoted fiancé. But he'd also started having longer conversations with his family. Longer absences where he claimed to be handling business for me but was actually seeing Monica. My investigator had followed him everywhere. I had photos of him with Monica at restaurants, at her apartment, at the park where they'd walk hand in hand. I had recordings of him telling her he loved her, that he was working on one big deal that would set them up for life. And I had documentation of every attempt his family made to access my accounts, change my legal documents, and position themselves to inherit my fortune. Now, 3 weeks into my charade, I had enough evidence to bury them all. But I wasn't ready to end the performance yet. I wanted them to reveal everything. Every dark corner of their souls. Every mercenary thought. And based on the conversation I'd overheard tonight, they were about to give me exactly that. I looked at Dr. Morrison as she prepared to leave. Schedule the family meeting for tomorrow. Tell them I want to discuss my will and my final wishes. Are you sure you're ready for this? Absolutely. It's time to see just how far they're willing to go. As she left, I pulled out my tablet and reviewed the footage from today's cameras. Julian and Patricia in the hallway discussing my assets. Julian's sister in the waiting room, on the phone with a lawyer asking about contesting wills. Julian's father in the cafeteria, calculating inheritance taxes on a napkin. A family of vultures circling what they thought was a dying woman. But this woman wasn't dying. And she was about to teach them all a lesson they'd never forget. I sent a message to Tom, increase surveillance. I want every movement tracked, every conversation recorded. And start preparing the legal documents. When this is over, I want them prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. His response was immediate, already on it. You're playing a dangerous game, boss. I know, I typed back. But I'm very good at dangerous games. After all, I didn't become a billionaire by playing it safe. I set down the tablet and walked back to the hospital bed. Tomorrow I'd be weak and dying again. But tonight I allowed myself to feel the full force of my anger and my power. Julian Laurent had chosen the wrong woman to betray. The family meeting was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon. By noon, I'd already watched Julian have 3 phone calls that made my skin crawl. The first was to Monica. Yeah, I miss you too, baby. Just a few more weeks and this will all be over. Then we can finally be together for real. He'd made that call from the hospital cafeteria, barely 50 feet from where I was supposedly dying. The second was to a lawyer. I need to know what happens if we get married before she passes. Does that guarantee I inherit everything? Or can the foundation still claim it? The lawyer had confirmed that marriage would make Julian my next of kin, giving him rights to contest any will that left assets elsewhere. The third call had been to his mother. She wants to do the wedding next week. Keep it small. Once we're married, I'll be legally entitled to everything. Then we just wait. I'd listened to it all through the surveillance feed on my tablet, making notes, staying calm. Tom had already forwarded copies to my legal team. Everything was being documented for the lawsuits that would come later. Now, lying in my hospital bed, I prepared for the performance of a lifetime. Dr. Morrison entered first, followed by Julian and his entire family. Patricia wore black, already in mourning apparently. Julian's sister, Nicole, carried a leather portfolio that I suspected contained documents they'd prepared for me to sign. His father, Robert, had the look of a man trying to appear solemn while calculating profit margins. "Thank you all for coming," I said weakly, my voice barely above a whisper. "I know this is difficult." "We're here for you, sweetheart," Julian said, taking his usual position beside the bed. "Whatever you need. I've been thinking about the future. About what happens when I'm gone." I paused, letting a tear roll down my cheek. The makeup artist I'd hired was a genius. I looked like I'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks. "I want to make sure everything is in order." Nicole leaned forward eagerly. "Of course, Gabrielle. We've actually brought some documents that might help streamline things. Just to make the process easier for you." "How thoughtful," I murmured. "What kind of documents?" She opened the portfolio, pulling out a stack of papers. "Well, there's a power of attorney that would allow Julian to handle your business affairs. Medical directives. And we took the liberty of having an attorney draft an updated will that's more comprehensive than your current one." I let my eyes widen slightly. "You did all that for me?" "We just want to help," Patricia said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "You shouldn't have to worry about these details when you're so ill." I reached for the papers with a trembling hand. Tom had already reviewed identical copies that Nicole had emailed to Julian last week. Every document was designed to transfer my assets to Julian and his family, cutting out my foundation and the legitimate charities I'd planned to support. "This is very thorough," I said softly. "But I'm confused about something. This will leave everything to Julian and his family. What about the Children's Technology Initiative? The Women in Business Foundation? The scholarships?" Robert cleared his throat. "Well, Gabrielle, while those are noble causes, we thought it might be better to keep things in the family. After all, Julian will be your husband. He'll be able to continue your legacy better than some impersonal foundation." "I see." I set the papers down on the bedside table. "And Julian, you're comfortable with this? Taking on all of these responsibilities?" He squeezed my hand, his eyes full of what looked like genuine emotion. He was a better actor than I'd given him credit for. "Baby, I just want whatever makes you happy. If you want to leave everything to charity, that's fine. I don't care about the money." The lie was so smooth, so practiced that I almost believed it myself. "That's very generous of you," I said. "But your family makes a good point. Maybe it would be better to keep things close." I watched greed flash across all their faces, quickly masked by expressions of concern. "However," I continued, "I'd like to make one request." "Anything," Julian said immediately. "I need a kidney transplant to survive. The doctors say finding a donor is difficult, but family matches are often the best option." I looked around the room at each of them. "Would any of you be willing to be tested? To see if you're a match?" The silence that followed was deafening. Patricia was the first to speak. "Oh, Gabrielle, I would love to help, but I'm far too old. My kidneys aren't in good enough shape for donation." She was 56 and had just run a marathon last month. I'd seen the photos on her social media. "What about you, Robert?" I asked. He shifted uncomfortably. "I have high blood pressure. My doctor has advised against any major surgeries." His last physical had been perfect. Tom had gotten a copy of his medical records. "Nicole?" She looked panicked. I'm actually terrified of surgery. I have severe anxiety about hospitals. I'm sorry, Gabrielle, but I just couldn't." Yet she'd had cosmetic surgery twice in the past year. Finally, I turned to Julian. "What about you, my love? Would you be tested?" His face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Fear, calculation, and finally, practiced concern. "Baby, of course I would. But the thing is, I only have 2 kidneys, and if something happened to me, I wouldn't be able to take care of you. Wouldn't it be better to wait for a donor from the transplant list? The doctors say I don't have time to wait. Then we'll find a donor. We'll pay whatever it takes. But I need to stay healthy so I can be here for you through the recovery process." He brought my hand to his lips. "I'm more useful to you with both kidneys taking care of you than I would be recovering from surgery myself." It was the most elaborate way of saying no I'd ever heard. I let my face fall, let disappointment show. "I understand. I wouldn't want any of you to sacrifice your health for me. We'll find another way, Patricia assured me. There are so many options nowadays. Paired donations, living donors from outside the family. You'll get your transplant. Empty promises from people who were waiting for me to die. I'm tired, I whispered. Could we continue this another time? Of course, sweetheart. Julian kissed my forehead. You rest. We'll handle everything. They filed out one by one, taking the unsigned documents with them. I heard them in the hallway, their voices low but excited. She's ready to sign, Nicole said. Did you see how weak she is? Give it a few more days, Julian replied. Let her get weaker. The more desperate she feels, the more likely she is to agree to anything. But what about the kidney thing? Robert asked. What if she actually finds a donor? She won't, Julian said confidently. Her blood type is rare and the transplant list is years long. By the time a kidney becomes available, it'll be too late. Patricia's voice was cold. And if by some miracle one does become available, we'll deal with it then. Right now, our focus is getting her to sign those documents before she changes her mind. After they left, Dr. Morrison came back in. She looked shaken. I can't believe what I just witnessed, she said. Not one of them was willing to even be tested. I knew they wouldn't be. I sat up, pulling off the oxygen cannula that wasn't actually delivering anything. They're not here because they care about me. They're here because they care about my money. The kidney request was brilliant, though. It exposed exactly who they are. That was the point. When I reveal all of this, I want there to be no doubt about their motives. I want evidence of their callousness, their greed, their complete lack of basic human decency. My phone buzzed with a message from Tom. Got everything on tape. The lawyer is going to have a field day with this. I typed back, good. How's the surveillance on Monica going? She's getting suspicious. Julian's been making excuses for weeks about why he can't see her more often. She's starting to ask questions. Let me know if she does anything unexpected. She's the wild card in all of this. I set down the phone and looked at Dr. Morrison. How much longer do you think I should keep this up? That depends on what you want to achieve. You already have enough evidence to destroy him legally. But I want more than that. I want him to fully commit. I want the wedding to happen, the documents to be signed, everything to be in place. Then, when he thinks he's won, I want to take it all away. You're playing with fire, Gabrielle? I've been playing with fire my whole life. It's how I forged my empire. I stood up, stretching muscles that were stiff from lying down for hours. Set up the wedding for next week. Something small, just immediate family. Make sure all the cameras are in place. And after the wedding? After the wedding we wait. Let him think he's secured his future. Let his family think they've won. And then, when they're celebrating their victory, I'm going to show them exactly what happens when you betray Gabrielle Laurent. Dr. Morrison nodded slowly. I hope you know what you're doing. I always do. After she left, I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Monica was waiting for Julian to come home. She had no idea she was dating a con artist who was engaged to a billionaire. She thought she was in love with a struggling entrepreneur who barely made ends meet. In a way, I felt sorry for her. She was a victim in this too, manipulated and deceived. But I couldn't worry about that now. My focus had to be on Julian and his family, on making sure they paid for what they tried to do. I pulled up the surveillance footage from earlier, watching it again. Their faces when I'd asked about kidney donation. The panic, the excuses, the immediate refusals. Not one of them had even pretended to consider it. And Julian, the man who claimed to love me, who'd promised to stand by me in sickness and in health, hadn't hesitated to protect his own interests over my life. That was all I needed to know. I sent one more message to Tom, move forward with all preparations. The endgame starts now. His response was immediate, copy that. This is going to be spectacular. I smiled, my first genuine smile in weeks. Yes, it was. Because Julian Laurent was about to learn that you don't con a billionaire. You especially don't con a billionaire who's smarter, richer, and far more ruthless than you could ever imagine. Monica Chin was a problem I hadn't fully anticipated. Wait, no. Not Chin. I needed a different name. Let me revise this. Monica Foster was a problem I hadn't fully anticipated. My private investigator, Sarah. No, not Sarah either. Let me call her Diane. My private investigator, Diane Parks, had been following Monica for 2 weeks, and what she'd discovered was unexpectedly complicated. I watched the surveillance footage on my tablet while pretending to sleep. Monica was 28, taught kindergarten at a public school in a low-income neighborhood, and lived in a modest one-bedroom apartment that she could barely afford on her teacher's salary. She drove a 15-year-old car, bought her clothes from thrift stores, and spent her weekends volunteering at an animal shelter. She wasn't a gold digger. She was just a woman in love with a liar. The footage showed her and Julian together at a coffee shop. She laughed at something he said, reaching across the table to hold his hand. The way she looked at him was painfully genuine, full of hope and affection. He told her he's an entrepreneur trying to get funding for a startup. Diane's voice narrated over the video. He's been giving her just enough money troubles to seem sympathetic without seeming like a complete failure. She thinks she's supporting him through a difficult time. I watched Julian lean in to kiss Monica, the same mouth that had kissed me just hours ago in this hospital room. Does she know about me? I asked Diane over the phone. Not at all. He's kept his two lives completely separate. Different phones, different social media accounts, different friend groups. As far as Monica knows, Julian is single and devoted to her. What about his family? She's never met them. He's told her they're estranged, that they don't approve of his career choices. She feels bad for him, thinks he's this noble guy who's been rejected by his snobby family. The irony was almost funny. Monica thought Julian was too good for his family. The truth was exactly the opposite. Keep monitoring her, I said. But don't make contact yet. I need to figure out how she fits into this. That had been 3 days ago. Now, watching more recent footage, I could see that Monica was starting to get suspicious. Julian had been making excuses about why he couldn't see her, claiming he was traveling for business, meeting with investors, dealing with family emergencies. The latest video showed Monica sitting in her apartment, looking at her phone with a troubled expression. Diane had managed to get access to Monica's phone records, and what I saw made me pause. Monica had started doing internet searches. How to know if your boyfriend is lying. Signs of a cheating partner. Background check services. She was getting close to the truth. I made a decision. I needed to talk to her. Tom, I called. He appeared in the doorway immediately. I need you to arrange a meeting with Monica Foster. Don't tell her who I am or why I want to meet. Just tell her it's about Julian. Are you sure that's wise? She could warn him. She won't. Not if I approach this correctly. Set it up for tomorrow somewhere public. And make sure Diane is there with full recording equipment. The next day, I left the hospital for the first time in 3 weeks. I'd told Julian I had a specialist appointment, and he'd barely hidden his relief at having a few hours to himself, probably to see Monica. I met her at a coffee shop in her neighborhood. Diane had told her that someone had information about Julian that she needed to hear. Monica had been hesitant but curious enough to agree. I arrived first, dressed in casual clothes with minimal makeup. Without the hospital gown and the artificial pallor, I looked completely different. Healthier. Stronger. More like myself. Monica walked in right on time, looking nervous. She was pretty in a natural way. No designer clothes, no expensive jewelry, just jeans and a simple sweater. She looked around the coffee shop, clearly unsure who she was meeting. I raised my hand slightly. Monica? I'm Gabrielle. She sat down across from me, her expression wary. The woman who called said you had information about Julian. How do you know him? I'm his fiancée, I said simply. Her face went white. His what? Fiancé. We've been together for 2 years, engaged for 6 months. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but Julian has been lying to both of us. For a moment I thought she might run. Her hands gripped the edge of the table, and I could see her breathing speed up. But she stayed, her eyes filling with tears. That's not possible. You would have told me. We've been together for 8 months. We're in love. I thought we were in love too, I said gently. But Julian isn't who either of us thinks he is. I pulled out my tablet and showed her photos. Pictures of Julian and me at charity galas, on vacation, at family gatherings with his parents. The same parents he'd told her he was estranged from. Our engagement announcement in the society pages. Photos from just last week of him in my hospital room, holding my hand while I was supposedly dying. Monica stared at the images, tears running down her face. I don't understand. Why would he do this? Because I'm a billionaire, I said bluntly. And he's trying to marry me for my money. She looked up sharply. You're Gabrielle Laurent? The tech CEO? Yes. Oh my God. She put her head in her hands. He told me he was dating someone casually a while back, but that it ended. He said he was focusing on his career, on us. He never mentioned being engaged. There's more you need to know. I spent the next 20 minutes telling her everything. About Julian's debts, his family's schemes, my fake illness, the entire elaborate con he'd been running on both of us. Monica listened in stunned silence. When I finished, she looked broken. I can't believe I was so stupid, she whispered. You weren't stupid. You were trusting. There's a difference. Why are you telling me this? Why not just confront him yourself? Because you deserve to know the truth. And because I need your help. She looked at me suspiciously. Help with what? Julian thinks I'm dying. He's planning to marry me next week, inherit my fortune, and then presumably disappear to start a new life. Maybe with you, maybe with someone else. I'm going to expose him, but I need evidence of everything he's done, including his relationship with you. You want me to testify against him? I want you to help me make sure he faces consequences for his actions. Not just against me, but against you too. He's defrauded both of us, lied to both of us, manipulated both of us. Monica was quiet for a long time. Then she said, he told me he loved me. Just yesterday he called and said he couldn't wait to build a life with me. Was any of it real? I don't think Julian knows what real love is. I think he only knows how to use people. She wiped her eyes and I saw something change in her expression. The heartbreak was still there, but underneath it was anger. What do you need me to do? Keep seeing him. Act like nothing's changed. Let him think you still believe his lies. And record everything. Every conversation, every promise, every lie he tells. Can you do that? She nodded slowly. He's supposed to come over tonight. He said he finally has time to see me because his business trip is over. Perfect. Diane will give you a recording device. It's completely legal to record conversations you're part of. Get him to talk about his plans for the future, about money, about his family. Get everything. And then what? And then next week, when he marries me thinking he secured his fortune, we're going to destroy him together. Monica looked at me with a mixture of pain and determination. I thought he was the one. I really did. I know. So did I. But we both deserve better than a man who sees us as opportunities instead of people. We talked for another hour, working out the details. Diane set Monica up with recording equipment and gave her instructions on how to gather evidence. By the time Monica left, she was no longer crying. She was angry, and that anger was going to be useful. I watched her walk away, feeling a strange kinship with this woman I'd never met before today. We were both Julian's victims, both deceived by his lies. But we were about to become his worst nightmare. Back at the hospital, I resumed my dying patient act. Julian arrived an hour later, looking refreshed and happy. I wondered if he'd just come from Monica's apartment. How was the specialist? He asked, kissing my cheek. Discouraging. They said the kidney situation is getting critical. I looked at him with desperate eyes. Julian, maybe we should move the wedding up. I want to be your wife. I don't want to wait. His eyes lit up. Are you sure you're strong enough? I'll make myself strong enough. For you. For us. Then let's do it. This weekend. Just us and family like we planned. Perfect. I squeezed his hand weakly. I love you so much. I love you too, baby. So much. As he held me, my phone buzzed with a text from Diane. Monica had already started recording. The first audio file was attached. I listened to it later after Julian left. Monica's voice asking Julian about his day. Julian's voice, smooth and affectionate, telling her about the investor meetings he'd had. Monica asking about their future together. Julian promising her the world. Just a little longer and everything will fall into place, he said on the recording. Then we can finally stop hiding, finally build the life we deserve. Such beautiful lies. Such perfect evidence. I sent the file to my legal team with a note. Add this to the pile. We're going to bury him. The week before the wedding was a masterclass in greed. Julian's family descended on the hospital like vultures sensing a dying animal. They came bearing gifts. Flowers I was allergic to, chocolates I supposedly couldn't eat, books I was too weak to read. But what they really brought was paperwork. Patricia arrived Monday morning with her lawyer, a greasy man named Howard Finch who specialized in estate planning. They found me in my hospital bed, looking appropriately frail. Gabrielle, darling, Patricia cooed, we brought someone to help make sure everything is properly organized before the wedding. Just to give you peace of mind. Howard stepped forward, his smile revealing too many teeth. Mrs. Laurent, I know this is a difficult time, but it's important to have all your legal affairs in order. Especially with your condition. I blinked at him weakly. My lawyers have already handled everything. I'm sure they have. But sometimes in situations like these, it's helpful to have a fresh perspective. Someone who understands the specific needs of blended families. Blended families. As if Julian had children from a previous marriage instead of just being a con artist. What exactly are you suggesting? I asked. Patricia sat on the edge of my bed, taking my hand. Well, we were thinking that once you and Julian are married, it might make sense to create a family trust. Something that would protect everyone's interests. Everyone's interests? Well, yes. Julian's, of course, as your husband. But also the family's. After all, we've been so supportive during this difficult time. It would be a way of acknowledging that support. I let that sink in for a moment. They wanted me to create a trust that would give them access to my money even before I died. How thoughtful, I murmured. What would such a trust involve? Howard pulled out documents. He'd actually brought pre-printed forms. It's quite simple. You'd transfer controlling shares of your company into the trust, along with your primary real estate holdings and investment portfolios. Julian would be the primary trustee, with your mother-in-law as a co-trustee to provide guidance and oversight. Patricia as co-trustee. The woman who'd embezzled from her last employer. And this would take effect when? Immediately upon signing. That way, if anything were to happen to you suddenly, there would be no complications with the estate. Everything would already be properly structured. If anything were to happen to me suddenly, the implication was clear. I'll need to think about it, I said. Patricia's smile tightened. Of course, dear. But don't take too long. The wedding is in just a few days, and these things do take time to process legally. They left the documents on my bedside table, hundreds of pages of legalese designed to transfer my entire fortune to Julian and his family. Tom reviewed them that afternoon. This is remarkable, he said. If you signed these, they'd have access to everything immediately. They wouldn't even have to wait for you to die. That's the point. They're getting impatient. What are you going to do? String them along. Make them think I'm considering it? I want them to get comfortable, to think they've won. Tuesday brought Nicole, who arrived with her own agenda. She'd brought brochures for funeral homes. I know this seems morbid, she said, spreading glossy pamphlets across my hospital bed, but it's important to plan ahead. We want to make sure your final arrangements reflect your status. Status. She meant money. These are the most exclusive funeral homes in the city, she continued. This one has a package that includes a marble mausoleum, a full orchestra, and custom caskets imported from Italy. Very dignified. I looked at the price list. $150,000 for the basic package. That's quite expensive. Well, you're a very important person. Your funeral should reflect that. And the good news is, if we book now and pay up front, we get a 15% discount. Pay up front. Of course. Who would be making these arrangements? I asked. Oh, Julian and I would handle everything. We wouldn't want you to worry about the details. We just need access to one of your accounts to cover the costs. Access to my accounts. Again. Let me discuss it with Julian, I said quietly. Nicole's smile was sharp. Of course. But don't wait too long. These premium slots fill up quickly. Premium slots at a funeral home. As if people were dying to get in. Wednesday was Robert's turn. He arrived with investment portfolios and a financial advisor named Greg Mullins, another one of Howard Finch's associates. Gabriel, we need to talk about protecting your assets, Robert announced, settling into the chair beside my bed. The market is volatile right now, and with your condition, we need to make sure your investments are properly managed. Greg nodded enthusiastically. I've been reviewing your current portfolio, and I have to say, I'm concerned. Your money is spread across too many different accounts and investments. It's inefficient. What we need is consolidation. Consolidation. Yes. Move everything into a few key accounts that can be managed more effectively. Accounts that Julian would have access to as your husband, so he can handle things if you're unable to. Julian having access to all my investment accounts. The same Julian who'd been fired from 3 jobs for embezzlement. What kind of consolidation are you suggesting? Greg laid out his plan. It involved liquidating most of my diverse investments and moving the cash into a few high-risk, high-fee accounts that he just happened to manage. Accounts that would charge enormous management fees and give Julian complete control. This seems very aggressive, I said. My current portfolio has been carefully balanced by experts. Robert leaned forward. Those experts don't understand the urgency of your situation. If something happens to you, Julian needs to be able to access these funds immediately. The current structure is too complicated. Too many passwords, too many authorization requirements. Too many safeguards against theft, he meant. I appreciate your concern, I said, but I need time to consider this. Robert's jaw tightened. Time is something you may not have, Gabrielle. We're trying to help you. After they left, I lay in bed and laughed. I actually laughed. The audacity of these people was almost admirable. They weren't even trying to be subtle anymore. They saw a dying woman and they were grabbing everything they could reach. Dr. Morrison came in to check on me. You're in a good mood. I just had 3 separate family members try to scam me in 3 different ways. It's like watching a very greedy, very stupid circus. Are you still planning to go through with the wedding? Absolutely. This weekend, I'm going to marry Julien Laurent in a small, intimate ceremony. And then, about a week after that, I'm going to destroy his entire world. Why wait a week after the wedding? Because I want him to feel secure. I want him to think he's won. I want him and his family to celebrate their victory, to start making plans for my money, to get comfortable in their new life. And then I want to rip it all away. Thursday brought all of them together for what they called a family strategy session. They gathered in my hospital room like a board of directors, ready to divvy up my assets. We've been thinking, Patricia began, that once you and Julien are married, it might be wise to make some immediate changes. For efficiency's sake. What kind of changes? Well, for starters, Julien should be added to all your bank accounts. Just as a precaution. And your company's board should be expanded to include family members, Robert added. To provide support and continuity. And we should update your will to reflect the new family structure, Nicole chimed in. They had it all planned out. Every asset accounted for, every loophole closed, every angle covered. They'd spent the week coordinating their attacks, making sure every possible piece of my fortune was within their reach. These are all very significant changes, I said. Which is why we should implement them right away, Patricia insisted. Before the wedding, ideally. That way you can relax and enjoy being married without worrying about business matters. Julien, who'd been quiet during most of this, finally spoke. Mom, maybe we should give Gabrielle some space. She's been through a lot this week. Nonsense. We're family. Family takes care of each other. I looked at Julien, saw the calculation in his eyes. He was playing good cop to their bad cop, positioning himself as my protector while still pushing the same agenda. I'll think about everything you've suggested, I said. But right now I'm very tired. Could we continue this after the wedding? They exchanged glances, a silent conversation happening between them. Of course, Patricia finally said. Rest dear. We'll talk more this weekend. After they left, I pulled out my tablet and reviewed the surveillance footage. Every conversation, every scheming phone call, every greedy calculation was recorded. My lawyers were building a case that would put them all away for years. Friday brought a surprise visitor, Monica. She appeared in my doorway dressed as a nurse, a disguise Diane had arranged. We'd planned this carefully, a chance for her to see the woman Julien was supposedly devoted to. So you're her, Monica said quietly, closing the door behind her. And you're the woman he actually loves, I replied. Or at least the woman he's convinced he loves. She moved closer, studying my face. You don't look that sick. That's because I'm not. The whole thing is an act. Julien doesn't know? Julien doesn't know anything except that he's about to become a very rich widower. Monica sat down, her expression troubled. I've been recording everything like you asked. He tells me he loves me every time we're together. He talks about our future, about the house we'll buy, the life we'll have. And all of it is based on you dying. Have you gotten him to talk about money? Yes. Last night he told me that his big deal is finally coming through. That by this time next month, we'll never have to worry about money again. He talked about traveling the world, buying a beach house, living the life we've always dreamed of. All on my money. All on your money, she confirmed. She looked at me with something like pity. How can you stand it? Being in the same room with him, knowing what he's planning. Because I know something he doesn't. I know how this story ends. And it doesn't end with him rich and happy. It ends with him in prison. Monica nodded slowly. Good. Because after everything I've learned this week, prison is too good for him. But it's a start. We talked for a few more minutes about the plan for the wedding and what would come after. Then Monica left, slipping back into her nurse disguise and disappearing down the hallway. Alone again, I thought about the week I'd just endured. 5 days of watching Julien's family try to steal from a dying woman. 5 days of listening to their schemes, their plans, their casual cruelty. But I'd gotten what I needed. Evidence of their intentions, documentation of their attempts to access my accounts, recordings of their discussions about dividing my assets. Tomorrow was Saturday. Tomorrow was my wedding day. And tomorrow Julian Laurent would take the first step toward his own destruction. Saturday morning arrived with unexpected news. Dr. Morrison, or rather the actor playing Dr. Stevens, entered my room with what looked like urgent information. "Gabriel, we may have found a kidney donor," he said loud enough for the nurses, actually my security team, to hear. "A perfect match. The donor is willing to proceed immediately." I sat up, making my face light up with hope. "Really? When can we do the transplant?" "We could schedule it for next week. But there's something you should know. The donor is requesting anonymity, but they did say they wanted to meet you first. They want to make sure you're worthy of the gift." This was perfect. Tom and I had planned this development specifically to test Julian one more time before the wedding. "Who is it?" I asked. "I can't say. But they'll be visiting this afternoon. You should prepare yourself emotionally. This could save your life." After he left, I waited. Julian arrived an hour later for what was supposed to be our pre-wedding meeting. He looked nervous, fidgeting with his phone. "I heard about the donor," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Isn't it wonderful? I might actually survive this." I watched his face carefully. For just a second I saw something flash across his features. Disappointment, maybe even anger. But he quickly masked it with a smile. "That's amazing, baby. I'm so happy for you." "For us," I corrected. "Now we can have a real future together, not just a few months." "Right. Of course. For us." He sat down, running his hand through his hair. "But you know, kidney transplants are risky. There's always a chance of rejection, complications. You shouldn't get your hopes up too much." The doctors seem optimistic. Doctors are always optimistic. They have to be. But the reality is that transplant surgery is dangerous, especially for someone in your weakened condition. He took my hand, his grip a little too tight. "I just don't want you to be disappointed if things don't work out." He didn't want the transplant to work. He wanted me to stay sick, to die on schedule according to his plans. "We should still get married today," he continued. "Just in case the transplant doesn't happen or doesn't work. I want to be your husband, Gabriel. I want that more than anything. Even if I survive? Even if I'm not dying anymore? Especially if you survive. I want to spend my life with you, healthy or sick. That's what love means." The lies rolled off his tongue so smoothly. I wondered if he even knew he was lying anymore, or if he told himself these stories so many times that he believed them. "The donor is coming this afternoon," I said. "Before the wedding. I'd like you to meet them." His expression tightened. "Is that necessary? I mean, if they want to remain anonymous. They want to meet both of us. To see the couple they're helping. I'm not sure I can make it. I have some last-minute wedding preparations. Julian, this person is giving me their kidney. The least we can do is meet them together." He couldn't refuse without seeming callous, so he agreed. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched. At 2:00, Tom entered the room dressed as a hospital administrator. "Your donor is here," he announced. "Are you ready?" Julian stood up quickly. "Actually, I just remembered I need to make a phone call. Wedding stuff. I'll be right back." He practically ran out of the room. I knew exactly where he was going, to call his mother to figure out what this meant for their plans. Tom closed the door. "He's panicking." "Good. Let him panic. Did you set up the donor encounter?" "Everything's ready. We hired an actor who'll play the role perfectly. Mid-50s, professional, the kind of person who would genuinely donate a kidney to a stranger." The donor arrived 20 minutes later, just as Julian returned looking composed but sweating slightly. The actor, who'd introduced himself as James Henderson, was exactly as Tom had described. Distinguished, calm, radiating quiet compassion. "I wanted to meet you both before making this final decision," James said, settling into a chair. "Donating a kidney is a serious commitment, and I want to make sure it's going to someone who'll appreciate it." "We appreciate it more than you can know," I said softly. James turned to Julian. "And you're the fiancé? You'll be helping Gabrielle through her recovery?" "Of course," Julian said quickly. "I'll be there for everything." "That's good. She'll need a lot of support. The recovery is lengthy, and there are lifelong medical requirements. Anti-rejection medications, regular checkups, dietary restrictions. It's not an easy road." "We'll handle it together," Julian said, but I could see him calculating. A lengthy recovery meant I wouldn't die quickly. Lifelong medical requirements meant ongoing expenses. This wasn't part of his plan. "I have to ask," James said, looking at Julian directly. "Have you considered being tested as a donor yourself? Family matches are often better than stranger donations." Julian's face went pale. My blood type isn't compatible. Have you been tested to confirm that? No, but I know my blood type. It's different from Gabrielle's. James nodded slowly. I see. It's just that I've always believed family should step up first before accepting organs from strangers. But perhaps your situation is different. The judgment in his tone was subtle but clear. Julian squirmed under the scrutiny. I want to help, Julian said defensively. But I'm more useful to Gabrielle healthy taking care of her than I would be recovering from surgery myself. Of course, James said. But his expression suggested he didn't believe that for a second. We talked for another 20 minutes. James asked about our relationship, our plans, what kind of life we envisioned together. Julian gave all the right answers, painting a picture of devoted love and shared dreams. But James kept asking pointed questions that made Julian uncomfortable. Finally, James stood up. I'll let you know my decision by tomorrow. I want to sleep on it, make sure I'm making the right choice. After he left, Julian was visibly shaken. What if he decides not to donate? Then I go back on the transplant list and wait. But the doctor said you don't have time to wait. Then I guess we'll have to hope he says yes. Julian's phone rang. He looked at the caller ID and his face tightened. I need to take this. I'll be back for the wedding at 4. He left and I immediately pulled up the surveillance feed. He'd gone to the hallway and was already on the phone with his mother. The donor is having second thoughts, he said urgently. He kept asking why I wasn't being tested, making me look bad. Patricia's voice was sharp through the speaker. You need to convince him not to donate. How am I supposed to do that? I don't know, figure it out. If she gets that transplant, she could live for years. We don't have years, Julian. We need her gone. I know. Let me think. Think fast. Because if she survives this, we're back to square one. All of this effort for nothing. I listened as they continued to plot, discussing ways to discourage James from donating, ways to make sure the transplant didn't happen. They even considered sabotaging the surgery if it was scheduled. Every word was being recorded. Every scheme was being documented. At 4 o'clock, the wedding began. It was a small ceremony in the hospital chapel. Just Julian, his family, Dr. Morrison as my witness, and a minister who was actually one of Tom's security team members. I was wheeled in, wearing a simple white dress and looking appropriately frail. Julian stood at the altar in a tailored suit, his family seated in the front row, all of them wearing expressions of solemn joy. The ceremony was brief. Traditional vows, exchange of rings, a kiss that made my skin crawl. And then it was done. I was Mrs. Julian Laurent, married to a man who was actively hoping I would die. Congratulations, Patricia said, hugging me carefully. Welcome to the family. Thank you for being here, I whispered. It means everything. We had a small reception in my hospital room, champagne, cake, toasts to our future. Julian's family was celebratory, barely containing their excitement. They thought they'd won. The marriage made Julian my next of kin, gave him legal rights to my estate, positioned him perfectly to inherit everything. But they didn't know about the prenuptial agreement I'd had my lawyers create. An ironclad document that protected my assets in case of divorce or Julian's proven infidelity. A document I'd signed weeks ago and filed away safely. They also didn't know about the recording devices in the wedding chapel, capturing every fake smile, every calculated gesture, every moment of their performance. At 8 o'clock, everyone left to let me rest. Julian kissed me goodbye, promised to return first thing in the morning, and walked out with his family. Through the surveillance feed, I watched them gather in the parking lot. We did it, Nicole said, laughing. She actually married him. Now we just wait, Robert agreed. A few more weeks, maybe a month, and this will all be over. What about the donor? Patricia asked Julian. I'll handle it. One way or another, that transplant isn't happening. They celebrated there in the parking lot, practically dancing with joy over my impending death. Tom entered my room, his face grim. You got all that? Every word. They're actually planning to sabotage the transplant. That crosses the line from fraud into attempted murder. We need to move up the timeline. No, I said firmly. Not yet. I want one more week. 1 week of them thinking they've won. Then we end this. Gabrielle, they're talking about killing you. They're talking about preventing a transplant that isn't actually happening. I'm not in any real danger. But they don't know that. Let them make more mistakes. Let them get more comfortable. The bigger they feel, the harder they'll fall. Tom shook his head. You're playing a dangerous game. I've been playing dangerous games my whole life. 1 more week, Tom. Then we destroy them all. As he left, I looked at my wedding ring. A beautiful diamond that probably cost Julian nothing since he'd likely used my own credit card to buy it. Mrs. Julian Laurent. It was the shortest marriage in history that would end with criminal charges. I pulled out my phone and sent a message to my legal team. Everything is in place. Prepare the lawsuits, the criminal complaints, and the press releases. Execution date, 1 week from today. Their response was immediate, standing by. This is going to be spectacular. I smiled, looking out at the city lights. 1 more week of being the dying billionaire. 1 more week of watching vultures circle. And then Gabrielle Laurent was going to rise from the dead and rain down hell on everyone who tried to bury her. The week after my wedding was a masterclass in deception and greed that exceeded even my darkest expectations. Julian moved into my hospital room, setting up a cot beside my bed so he could be there for me at all times. To anyone watching, it looked like devoted spousal care. But I knew the truth. He was making sure I didn't change my will or make any decisions without his knowledge. On Monday, James Henderson called with his decision. "I'm sorry, Gabrielle," he said over speakerphone, "but I've decided not to go through with the donation. I've been doing some research and frankly, I'm not comfortable with the situation." Julian's face lit up before he could control it. "Just for a second, but I saw it." "What changed your mind?" I asked weakly. "Personal reasons. I wish you the best in finding another donor." After he hung up, Julian held me while I cried, fake tears, but he didn't know that. "It's okay, baby. We'll find another way. We always do." But through my tears, I watched him text his mother. The donor backed out. We're back on track. Tuesday brought a visit from Julian's lawyer, Howard Finch, with updated estate documents. "Now that you're married," Howard explained, "we need to ensure Julian is protected in case anything happens to you. These documents establish him as your primary beneficiary and give him power of attorney over all your medical and financial decisions." I looked at the papers with exhausted eyes. "Can I review these with my own lawyers first?" Of course. But time is of the essence. You never know when things might take a turn for the worse." Julian squeezed my hand. "Baby, Howard is just trying to help. But if you want your lawyers to look at it, that's fine. We have time." Except they didn't think we had time. They thought I was dying. Wednesday, I caught Julian on the phone with Monica. He'd stepped into the bathroom thinking I was asleep, but the surveillance equipment Tom had installed picked up every word. "I know I haven't seen you much, babe. The situation is complicated. You've been married for 3 days, Julian." 3 days. When were you planning to tell me? Monica's voice was sharp, angry. I'd prepped her for this confrontation, told her to push him. "What are you talking about?" "I saw the marriage license. It's public record. You married Gabrielle Laurent. The billionaire you told me was just a business contact." Julian was silent for a long moment. Then, "Monica, listen to me. It's not what you think. She's dying. She has maybe a few weeks left. Her lawyers required us to get married for some legal thing with her estate. It doesn't mean anything." "You married a dying woman for her money?" "I married her to secure our future. Once this is over, once everything is settled, we can finally be together openly. We can have everything we've ever dreamed of." "This is insane. This is criminal. This is survival," Julian hissed. "I've invested 2 years in this relationship. I've played the devoted boyfriend, the caring fiancé. I've earned this money, Monica. And when I get it, half of it is yours. We'll leave the country if we have to. Start over somewhere beautiful. Isn't that what you wanted?" There was a long pause. Then Monica said, "I need time to think." "Don't think too long. And don't do anything stupid. You're in this too deep now. If you go to the police, you'll be implicated as an accessory." It was a threat, clear and simple. And it was exactly what I needed him to say on tape. After he hung up, he came back to my bedside with a smile. "Sorry, baby. Just handling some business stuff." "Is everything okay?" I asked weakly. "Everything's perfect. Get some rest." Thursday brought the first open discussion of murder. I wasn't supposed to hear it. Julian and his mother thought I was sedated. I'd pretended to take sleeping medication that Dr. Morrison had given me. But I was wide awake, listening through the surveillance feed as they talked in the hallway. "How much longer?" Patricia demanded. "It's been weeks. She should be getting worse. The doctors say her condition is stable. She could last another month, maybe 2. That's unacceptable. We need to speed this up." "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that sometimes in hospitals mistakes happen. Medications get mixed up. Dosages are incorrect. Patients in weakened conditions decline." Julian was quiet. Then, You're talking about killing her. I'm talking about helping nature along. She's dying anyway, Julian. We'd just be accelerating the inevitable. That's murder, Mom. That's pragmatism. Every day she lives is another day she might change her mind, might rewrite her will, might figure out what we're doing. We've come too far to risk it now. Another long pause. Let me think about it. Don't think too long. I can find someone to help if you're too squeamish to do it yourself. I lay in my bed, listening to my husband and my mother-in-law discuss how to murder me, and felt a cold rage settle over my bones. They weren't just con artists anymore. They were willing to commit actual murder for my money. Tom burst into my room minutes later. Did you hear that? Every word. We need to end this now. This has gone beyond fraud. They're planning to kill you. They're planning to kill someone who's already dying. Let them keep talking. Let them make more mistakes. I want every possible charge we can file against them. Gabrielle. One more week, Tom. I promise. One more week and this ends. Friday brought all of them together for what they called a family meeting in my hospital room. They thought I was too weak to notice the tension, the undercurrents of their conversation. But I noticed everything. We've been thinking about your foundation, Patricia began. The one that's set to inherit your assets. What about it? I whispered. Well, it seems unnecessarily complicated. Wouldn't it be simpler to leave everything to Julian? He could then decide how to allocate funds to charity. It would be much more efficient. The foundation was important to me, I said. Helping women in business, supporting technology education. And Julian can continue that work, Robert interrupted. But having him in control would streamline everything. Make the transition easier. Nicole pulled out more papers. We've had Howard draft a new will. It leaves everything to Julian with a few small provisions for charity. Much cleaner than the current situation. They were circling in for the kill, metaphorically and possibly literally. I'll think about it, I said. There's not much time to think, Patricia pressed. Your condition could deteriorate at any moment. It would be better to have everything in order now. Julian put his hand on his mother's arm. Mom, give her some space. This is a lot to process. Playing good cop again. But I'd heard him on the phone with Patricia earlier, discussing exactly this strategy. After they left, I pulled up the surveillance footage and watched it again. Their faces, their body language, their barely concealed impatience. They were done waiting. They were ready to take what they thought was theirs. Saturday morning, exactly 1 week after my wedding, Julian made the mistake I'd been waiting for. He'd gone to see Monica thinking I was asleep. The confrontation was vicious. I can't do this anymore, Monica said. I can't be with someone who married another woman for money, who's waiting for her to die so he can inherit her fortune. You knew what this was from the beginning, Julian argued. I knew you were ambitious. I didn't know you were a monster. A monster? I'm giving us a future. In a few weeks, we'll have more money than we could spend in 10 lifetimes. We can go anywhere, do anything. Isn't that worth a little patience? She's a human being, Julian. She's sick and dying and you're just waiting like a vulture. She's a billionaire who has more money than she knows what to do with. I'm just redistributing wealth. If anything, I'm doing society a favor. Monica laughed, a bitter sound. You've convinced yourself you're the hero of this story. But you're not. You're just a con artist who's about to get caught. Caught? By who? You. Are you threatening me? I'm telling you that I'm done. I'm done with the lies, the schemes, the waiting for someone to die so we can profit from it. I'm out. You can't be out. You're an accomplice now. You've known about this for weeks and said nothing. That makes you guilty too. I've been recording everything, Julian. Every conversation, every admission, every threat. And I'm giving it all to Gabrielle. There was a sound of movement, then Julian's voice, low and dangerous. You're bluffing. Am I? Test me. If you do that, you'll go down too. I don't care. I'd rather go to prison with a clear conscience than spend another day helping you steal from a dying woman. Silence. Then Julian's voice, colder than I'd ever heard it. You'll regret this. The only thing I regret is ever meeting you. Monica left, and the surveillance showed Julian standing alone in her apartment, his hands clenched into fists, his face twisted with rage. He pulled out his phone and called his mother. We have a problem. Monica's going to talk. Then we silence her. What? You heard me. We can't afford loose ends, Julian. Not when we're this close. You want me to hurt Monica? I want you to do whatever is necessary to protect our interests. She's a threat. Deal with her. I'd heard enough. More than enough. I called Tom. End it. End it now. Call the police, call my lawyers, call everyone. They just threatened Monica. This stops today. Finally. I'll have units here in 10 minutes. Make it 5. And Tom? Make sure they bring enough handcuffs. We're arresting the whole family. As I waited for the police to arrive, I thought about everything I'd endured over the past month. The fake illness, the manipulation, the lies. Watching the man I'd planned to marry reveal himself as a monster. Listening to his family plot my death. But it was over now. And they had no idea what was about to hit them. I got out of bed, pulled off the hospital gown, and changed into the business suit I'd had Tom bring earlier. I washed off the makeup that made me look sick. I stood up straight, feeling my strength return. When Julian came back expecting to find me weak and dying, he was going to find Gabrielle Laurent, Billionaire CEO, and the woman who just orchestrated his complete destruction. The game was over. And I'd won. Julian returned to my hospital room at exactly 2 p.m., looking agitated and distracted. He was probably still thinking about Monica's threat, trying to figure out how to handle the situation. He opened the door and froze. I was standing by the window wearing a charcoal business suit, my hair styled, my makeup professional rather than sickly. All the medical equipment had been removed. The hospital bed was made. I looked exactly like what I was, a healthy, powerful woman who just caught a predator in her trap. Gabrielle? His voice was uncertain. What's going on? Why are you out of bed? Because I'm not sick, Julian. I never was. The color drained from his face. What are you talking about? You have kidney failure. The doctors said. The doctors I hired to say exactly what I wanted them to say. I turned to face him fully, letting him see the strength in my posture, the clarity in my eyes. Every test result, every diagnosis, every deterioration, all of it was staged. All of it was a performance designed to see what you would do when you thought I was dying. He stumbled backward, hitting the door. That's not possible. It's completely possible when you have unlimited resources and a very good reason to uncover the truth. I pulled out my tablet and showed him footage, surveillance video of him and his mother in the hallway, discussing how to divide my assets. I've been watching you, Julian. Recording you. Documenting every scheme, every lie, every mercenary calculation. His eyes went wide as he watched himself on the screen, heard his own voice plotting my death. This is... He struggled for words. This can't be legal. Recording conversations in my own hospital room? Perfectly legal. Having security cameras in my private space? Completely legal. Documenting your attempts to defraud me? Not only legal but recommended by my lawyers. I swiped to another video. Him with Monica, promising her half my fortune. You've been busy, haven't you? Juggling 2 women, building an empire on lies. Gabrielle, please. I can explain. Explain what? How you've been cheating on me for 8 months. How you and your family have been planning to steal my company. How your mother suggested killing me to speed up the inheritance. Which part would you like to explain first? He opened his mouth, then closed it. There was nothing he could say. The evidence was overwhelming. How did you? He started, then stopped. Monica. She told you. Monica helped me, yes. After I told her the truth about who you really are. Turns out she's not a big fan of con artists who use people. The door opened and Tom entered, followed by 2 police officers and my legal team. Julian looked at them, then back at me, his face a mask of panic. Mr. Laurent, one of the officers said, we have a warrant for your arrest on charges of fraud, attempted theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, and making terroristic threats. Terroristic threats? I never... Your conversation with your mother this morning about silencing Monica Foster was recorded. You threatened a witness. That's a felony. As they read him his rights and put him in handcuffs, Julian stared at me with a mixture of shock and hatred. You set me up. This whole thing was a trap. Yes, it was. I set a trap for gold diggers and con artists and you walked right into it. Along with your entire family. My family? His face went even paler. What did you do? They're being arrested as we speak. Your mother for conspiracy to commit murder. Your father for attempted financial fraud. Your sister for falsifying legal documents. Howard Finch for legal malpractice and fraud. I've been very thorough. As they led Julian away, he turned back one last time. I loved you. Doesn't that count for something? You loved my money. There's a difference. And yes, it counts for something. It counts as an aggravating factor in your sentencing. After he was gone, my head lawyer, Catherine Walsh, stepped forward. That was incredibly satisfying to watch. We've filed criminal charges, civil suits for damages, and restraining orders against the entire Laurent family. We've also frozen all their assets pending the outcome of the criminal trials. What about Monica? She's cooperating fully. Her recordings are excellent evidence. She'll likely face minimal charges, possibly none if the DA believes she was also a victim. Make sure she's protected. Julian's mother made threats. Already done. She has 24-hour security. The next hour was a whirlwind of activity. Police came and went, taking statements and evidence. My real doctors arrived to examine me and confirm I was never actually sick. Tom's security team dismantled all the surveillance equipment and compiled the footage into organized files for the prosecution. By 4 p.m. it was time for the press conference. Catherine had arranged it in the hospital's main conference room. Media from across the country had gathered, summoned by mysterious promises of a major announcement from Gabrielle Laurent. I walked into the room to an explosion of camera flashes. I looked healthy, powerful, completely unlike the dying woman the few people who knew about my illness might have expected. Thank you all for coming, I began, standing at the podium. I'm here to make an announcement about an elaborate fraud scheme that was perpetrated against me, and to share a cautionary tale about what happens when people mistake wealth for weakness. I spent the next 30 minutes outlining everything. The fake illness, Julian's betrayal, his family's schemes, the recorded conversations, the arrests. I showed selected footage, played audio recordings, presented evidence that left no doubt about what had happened. I want to be very clear, I said. I'm not the victim here, at least not in the traditional sense. I had the resources and the intelligence to protect myself, to uncover the truth, to seek justice. But there are thousands of people every year who are targeted by similar schemes, people who don't have my advantages, who lose everything to con artists and fraudsters. I paused, letting that sink in. That's why I'm announcing the creation of the Laurent Foundation for Fraud Prevention. This foundation will provide free legal services to victims of financial fraud, fund investigations into suspected con artists, and educate people about how to protect themselves from schemes like the one perpetrated against me. The questions came fast and furious after that. How long had I suspected? When did I decide to stage the illness? What would happen to Julian and his family? Was I hurt by the betrayal? I answered them all honestly. Yes, I was hurt. No, I didn't regret my decision to expose them. Yes, I hoped they would face serious prison time. One reporter asked, "Do you think this experience will make you more cautious about relationships in the future?" I think this experience taught me that my instincts were right. When I found those text messages, I could have confronted Julian immediately. Instead, I investigated. I gathered evidence. I built a case. And because of that, I'm not just ending a relationship. I'm ending a criminal enterprise that was targeting vulnerable people. If that makes me cautious, then so be it. After the press conference, I went back to my real office for the first time in a month. My team welcomed me with cheers and relief. They'd known something was happening but not the details. "It's good to have you back, boss," my COO said. "The company missed you." I missed the company. But I had important work to do. That evening, I met with Monica at a quiet restaurant. She looked tired but relieved. "I can't believe it's over," she said. "I keep expecting Julian to call, to threaten me to." "He can't call. He's in jail with no bail. The judge considered him a flight risk." "Good." She took a sip of her wine. "I'm sorry, by the way. For being involved with him, for not seeing through his lies sooner. You were a victim too, Monica. You fell in love with someone who didn't exist. That's not your fault. Still, I should have known better. We both should have. But we didn't, and now we do. The question is, what are we going to do with that knowledge?" We talked for hours about what came next. Monica wanted to help with the foundation, to use her experience to prevent others from being conned. I offered her a position as a victim advocate, helping people navigate the aftermath of fraud. "I'd like that," she said. "I'd like to turn this horrible experience into something useful. That's what I'm trying to do too." Over the next few days, more details emerged. Julian's family had been running similar scams for years. His mother had been married 3 times, each time to a wealthy man who died under mysterious circumstances. His sister had been sued multiple times for fraud. His father had filed for bankruptcy to hide assets from creditors. They were professional con artists, and I'd almost become their biggest score. The trial was set for 6 months later. The prosecution had so much evidence that Julian's lawyers advised him to take a plea deal. He refused, insisting he could convince a jury that he genuinely loved me. "Let him try," I told Catherine. "I look forward to watching him fail." But in the quiet moments when I was alone in my penthouse, I did grieve. Not for Julian, he'd never been real. But for the relationship I'd thought I had, for the future I'd imagined, for the naive part of me that had wanted to believe in true love. That part was gone now, burned away by betrayal and calculation. I didn't regret losing it, but I acknowledged the loss. Dr. Morrison came to visit me a week after the arrests. "How are you holding up?" "I'm fine. Better than fine, actually. I feel cleansed." No regrets about the deception? None. If I'd confronted him immediately, he would have lied, manipulated, maybe even convinced me I was wrong. By staging the illness, I gave him enough rope to hang himself. And he did, spectacularly. What about moving forward? Are you going to date again? Eventually. But not for a while. I need to remember who I am without someone else's expectations clouding my vision. She nodded. You're one of the strongest people I know, Gabrielle. What you did took incredible courage and control. Or incredible paranoia and trust issues. Sometimes paranoia is just heightened awareness. And your trust issues were completely justified. After she left, I stood at my window looking out at the city I'd conquered once through business and now through justice. Somewhere out there, Julian was sitting in a cell, finally understanding that he'd targeted the wrong woman. And somewhere out there, other con artists were plotting their next moves, looking for their next victims. But now there was a foundation dedicated to stopping them. Now there were resources for victims. Now there was proof that fraud didn't always pay. I turned my betrayal into a weapon against everyone who preyed on vulnerable people. And in doing that, I'd reclaimed my power and my dignity. The broken woman Julian had expected to manipulate was gone. In her place stood Gabrielle Laurent, billionaire, fighter, and survivor. And I was just getting started. The trial began on a cold morning in March, 6 months after Julian's arrest. The courthouse was packed with media, curious onlookers, and representatives from organizations that supported fraud victims. I sat in the front row of the gallery, dressed in a Navy power suit, my expression calm and composed. Julian sat at the defense table, looking thin and haggard. Prison hadn't been kind to him. His expensive clothes were gone, replaced by a cheap suit his overworked public defender had probably bought at a discount store. Our eyes met once across the courtroom. I didn't look away. I wanted him to see exactly who I was, not the dying woman he tried to exploit, but the woman who destroyed him. The prosecution's case was devastating. Catherine Walsh led the team, and she was merciless in her presentation of evidence. Surveillance footage of Julian and his family plotting. Audio recordings of conversations about my death. Text messages discussing how to divide my assets. Financial records showing Julian's debts and desperation. Then came Monica's testimony. She walked to the stand with her head held high, though I could see her hands trembling slightly. She'd been through hell. Death threats from Julian's associates, harassment from his supporters, constant media attention. But she'd never wavered in her commitment to tell the truth. "Miss Foster," Catherine began, "how did you meet the defendant?" "Through a dating app. About 10 months ago. He seemed kind, hardworking, genuine." "And what did he tell you about his life?" "He said he was an entrepreneur trying to start a business. That he was struggling financially but had big dreams. He never mentioned being engaged, never mentioned Gabrielle Laurent." "When did you learn the truth?" "When Gabrielle contacted me. She told me Julian was engaged to her, that he was planning to marry her for her money. At first I didn't believe it. But then she showed me proof." Catherine pulled up photos on the courtroom screens. Pictures of Julian and me together, our engagement announcement, wedding photos. Monica's voice cracked slightly as she continued. "I realized I'd been dating a man who was actively engaged to someone else. A man who was planning to inherit billions from a woman he was letting die." Objection. Julian's lawyer stood up. "The witness is characterizing my client's actions." "Sustained," the judge said. "Miss Foster, please stick to what you directly observed or heard." Monica nodded. "Julian told me that once his big deal came through we would be rich. That we could travel the world, buy a house, never worry about money again. He said this multiple times." "And did he ever explain what this big deal was?" "Not directly. But after I learned the truth I understood. His big deal was Gabrielle dying and him inheriting her fortune." The courtroom murmured. The judge called for order. Catherine played the recordings Monica had made. Julian promising her wealth, Julian discussing his plans with his mother, Julian threatening her when she said she would talk. By the time Monica stepped down, Julian's defense was in shambles. His lawyer tried to argue that Julian had genuinely loved me, that the recordings were taken out of context, that he'd never actually intended to harm anyone. Then it was my turn to testify. I walked to the stand feeling the weight of every eye in the courtroom. This was my moment to speak, to tell my story, to make sure everyone understood exactly what Julian had done. Catherine started with the basics. Ms. Laurent, when did you first suspect something was wrong in your relationship with the defendant? When I found text messages on his phone. Messages to Monica Foster that made it clear he was in a relationship with her while engaged to me. And what did you do? I hired investigators. I needed to know the truth about who Julian really was. And what did you discover? I spent the next hour outlining everything. Julian's debts, his family's criminal history, the elaborate schemes they'd run before targeting me. And then I explained my decision to stage the illness. Why did you choose such an extreme approach? Catherine asked. Because I needed to know the truth. If I'd confronted Julian with the text messages, he would have lied. He would have manipulated me, made excuses, possibly convinced me I was overreacting. By creating a situation where he thought I was dying, I could see his true character. I could document his actions when he believed there were no consequences. And what did those actions reveal? That he saw me as a bank account, not a person. That he was actively hoping I would die so he could inherit my money. That his family was willing to commit murder to speed up that process. Catherine played the recordings. Patricia discussing how to accelerate my death. Julian refusing to be tested as a kidney donor. Nicole planning my funeral to maximize her commission. Robert calculating inheritance taxes. The jury looked horrified. Several members were shaking their heads. Julian's lawyer tried to discredit me on cross-examination. Ms. Laurent, isn't it true that you deliberately deceived my client? That you created an elaborate hoax designed to entrap him? I created a test, I corrected. A test to see if the man I was planning to marry actually loved me or just loved my money. He failed that test spectacularly. But you lied about being sick. You manipulated him. I revealed the truth about who he was. Everything he said, every action he took, every scheme he plotted, that was real. That was who Julian Laurent truly is when he thinks no one is watching. The lawyer tried several more angles, but I prepared for this. Every question, every attack, I turned back on Julian and his actions. When I stepped down, I knew we'd won. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Witness after witness testified about Julian's schemes, his debts, his pattern of targeting wealthy women. His previous relationships were examined. 2 other women came forward to say he'd borrowed money from them and never paid it back. His family members testified against each other, each trying to minimize their own involvement. Patricia claimed she'd been joking about accelerating my death. Nicole insisted she didn't know the funeral planning was wrong. Robert said he'd just been trying to help with financial planning. The jury didn't believe any of them. The verdict came back after just 4 hours of deliberation. Guilty on all counts. Fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, making terroristic threats, attempted theft. Julian's face crumbled as the verdict was read. His mother screamed from her seat in the gallery. His sister sobbed. His father sat in stony silence. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Catherine told me to expect significant prison time. The judge is not happy, she said. Fraud against a vulnerable person, even a fake vulnerable person, is taken very seriously. Combined with the threats against Monica and the evidence of premeditation, I'd expect at least 10 years. Maybe more. The sentencing hearing was quieter than the trial. Just the essential people. Lawyers, family members, victims, press. The judge looked at Julian with open disgust. Mr. Laurent, in my 30 years on the bench, I have never seen such a calculated attempt to exploit another person. You targeted Ms. Laurent specifically because of her wealth. You deceived her, manipulated her, and when you thought she was dying, you didn't offer comfort. You offered to speed her death along. Julian tried to speak. Your Honor, I'm not finished. You also deceived Ms. Foster, using her genuine affection as cover for your schemes. You threatened her when she tried to do the right thing. And your family participated in a conspiracy that can only be described as depraved. He sentenced Julian to 15 years in federal prison. Patricia got 12 years. Nicole got 8. Robert got 10. Howard Finch lost his law license and got 5 years. As they were led away in handcuffs, Julian looked at me one last time. His expression was a mixture of hatred and disbelief, as if he still couldn't quite grasp how his perfect plan had fallen apart. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, no triumph. Just a quiet certainty that justice had been served. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed me with questions. I gave a brief statement. Today's verdict sends a clear message. Fraud will not be tolerated, and those who prey on vulnerable people will face serious consequences. I hope this case encourages other victims to come forward, to seek justice, to refuse to be silenced by shame or fear. Someone asked if I felt vindicated. I feel relieved. Relieved that a dangerous con artist is off the streets. Relieved that his victims, including me, can move forward. Relieved that the legal system worked as it should. What's next for you? I'm going back to work. The Loran Foundation for Fraud Prevention is officially launching next month. We've already helped 15 victims get justice and we're just getting started. That evening, I hosted a small celebration at my penthouse. Dr. Morrison, Tom, Monica, Catherine, Diane, and my core team from the company. We toasted to justice, to new beginnings, to the end of a dark chapter. You did an incredible thing, Dr. Morrison said. Not just for yourself, but for everyone he might have hurt in the future. We all did it together, I replied. Everyone in this room played a part in taking down Julian Loran and his family. Monica raised her glass. To Gabrielle. The woman who turned a betrayal into a movement. As we drank and talked and celebrated, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Genuine happiness. Not the fake smiles I'd worn while pretending to be dying, but real joy at being surrounded by people who'd stood by me, who'd helped me, who'd believed in justice. Later, standing at my window looking out at the city, I reflected on everything that had happened. The pain, the betrayal, the elaborate scheme, the trial. It had been exhausting, emotionally devastating, and completely necessary. Julian Loran had tried to destroy me for my money. Instead, I destroyed him with truth. And in doing so, I discovered who I really was. Not just a billionaire, not just a CEO, but a fighter who refused to be victimized, who turned pain into power, who made sure that one con artist's greed became a lesson for anyone else who thought wealth made someone weak. The broken woman Julian expected never existed. And the strong woman I'd become was ready for whatever came next. 6 months after the sentencing, I stood in the lobby of the Loran Foundation's new headquarters, watching the final touches being put on our sign. The building was beautiful, modern, welcoming, designed to make victims feel safe and supported rather than judged or pitted. It's perfect, Monica said, standing beside me. She'd become my right hand at the foundation, using her experience to help others navigate the aftermath of fraud and betrayal. It is, I agreed. How many cases are we handling now? 43 active investigations. 62 victims receiving legal support. And we've received over 2,000 requests for help in the past month. The foundation had exceeded every expectation. We'd helped convict 12 con artists, recovered millions in stolen assets, and provided counseling and support to hundreds of victims. The press had called it revolutionary. I called it necessary. My company was thriving too. In the months since the trial, we'd launched 2 new products and expanded into 3 new markets. Turns out, nearly dying, even fake dying, gives you a certain clarity about priorities and business strategy. But the real change was personal. I'd spent the months after the trial in therapy, working through the betrayal and the complicated feelings that came with it. Dr. Morrison had recommended a therapist who specialized in financial abuse, and she'd helped me understand that what Julian had done wasn't just fraud, it was a profound violation of trust that went beyond money. You're allowed to be hurt, the therapist had said. You're allowed to grieve the relationship you thought you had, even if it was never real. So I'd grieved. I'd been angry. I'd questioned my judgment and my ability to trust. And then slowly I'd healed. Now, standing in the foundation's lobby, I felt stronger than I'd ever been. Not because I'd won some victory over Julian, he was rotting in prison and barely worth thinking about, but because I'd discovered my own resilience, my own capacity to turn pain into purpose. Ms. Loran? A young woman approached hesitantly. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm Rebecca, one of our new clients. I just wanted to thank you. For what? For creating this place. For making it okay to admit I was scammed. For fighting back. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. My ex-fiancé stole everything from me. My savings, my inheritance, my credit. I thought I was alone, that I was stupid for trusting him. But your story, it made me realize I wasn't stupid. I was just human. I hugged her, this stranger who'd been through her own version of my nightmare. You're not alone anymore. And you're definitely not stupid. You're a survivor and we're going to help you get justice. After she left, Monica smiled at me. You're good at this. At making people feel heard. I've had practice being unheard. It makes you appreciate the opposite. We walked through the foundation's offices, victim support rooms, legal consultation areas, investigation departments, counseling centers. Everything designed to help people rebuild their lives after fraud. In the conference room, my team was preparing for a presentation to potential donors. The foundation was funded by my personal wealth, but we were expanding and needed additional support. We have 3 new corporate sponsors, my development director reported, and 5 high-net-worth individuals interested in creating endowments. Excellent. What about the educational programs? We're launching the fraud prevention workshops next month. High schools, colleges, community centers. We're teaching people how to recognize red flags, protect their assets, and report suspicious activity. It was everything I'd hoped to build. A comprehensive support system for victims and a prevention network to stop fraud before it happened. That evening, I had dinner with Dr. Morrison at our favorite restaurant. "You look happy," she observed. "Genuinely happy." "I am. For the first time in, I don't even know how long." "Before Julian?" "Maybe before that. I think I was so focused on building my company, on proving myself, that I forgot what happiness actually felt like. And now I'm building something that matters in a different way. The company is about innovation and profit, and that's important. But the foundation is about helping people, about preventing the kind of pain I experienced. That feels meaningful." We talked about the trial, about Julian's appeals, all denied, about his family members who were also serving their sentences. Patricia had tried to claim diminished capacity due to age. The judge had laughed her out of court. "Have you thought about dating again?" Dr. Morrison asked. "Not really. I'm not opposed to it, but I'm also not looking. Something happens naturally, fine. But I'm not going to force it." "That's healthy. You've been through a lot." "I've also discovered I'm fine alone. Better than fine, actually. I'm complete on my own. If someone comes along who adds to my life rather than complicates it, great. But I don't need that to be happy." 2 weeks later, something unexpected happened. I was at the foundation reviewing case files when Monica knocked on my door. "There's someone here to see you. He says he used to visit you in the hospital." I looked up, confused. "What?" "He says his name is Adrian Cross. He was a volunteer reader at the hospital during your illness. He didn't know who you were, he just came to read to patients who wanted company." I remembered him. A quiet man in his mid-30s who'd come 3 times a week to read to patients. He'd read to me twice before Julian had asked him to stop, claiming I needed to rest. "Send him in." Adrian walked in looking nervous. He was tall, with kind eyes and an easy smile. Not conventionally handsome, but appealing in a gentle way. "Ms. Laurent, I wasn't sure if you'd remember me." "I remember. You read me Toni Morrison and Gabriel Garcia Marquez. You had good taste in literature." He laughed. "I'm a librarian. It comes with the territory. I wanted to apologize for stopping the visits. Your fiancé, well, your husband at the time, told me you didn't want visitors anymore." "Julian told you that?" "Yes. He said you were too tired, too ill." I felt bad, but I understood. Or I thought I did. Then I saw the news about the trial and realized. He trailed off, looking uncomfortable. "That you'd been visiting a perfectly healthy woman who was running an elaborate con on a con artist?" "Something like that, yes." I gestured for him to sit. "Why are you here, Adrian?" "Honestly? Because I wanted to see if you were real. When I was reading to you, you seemed so, I don't know, present, engaged. Not like someone who was dying. And I kept thinking about you after the visit stopped. Then I saw the news and I wanted to meet the real Gabriel Laurent." We talked for an hour. He told me about his work at the public library, his love of books, his volunteer work with literacy programs. He asked me about the foundation, about my company, about what I'd learned from the whole experience with Julian. "Can I ask you something personal?" he said finally. "Go ahead. How do you trust people now? After everything that happened?" I thought about that carefully. But I also realized that Julian was an exception, not the rule. Most people are decent. Most people don't scheme to steal your fortune or plot your death. I can't let one con artist make me suspicious of everyone. That's a healthy perspective. It's a necessary one. Otherwise he wins. Even from prison, he wins if he makes me unable to connect with people. Adrian nodded. "Would you like to get coffee sometime? Just as, I don't know, friends who share an interest in good literature and helping people?" I smiled. "I'd like that." We exchanged numbers and he left. I sat in my office afterward, thinking about the strangeness of life. Julian had tried to isolate me, to control who I saw and spoke to. He'd sent away a kind librarian who just wanted to read to a sick woman. And now, months later, that same librarian had walked back into my life. Not because of my money, he'd known nothing about me when we first met. Not because of my status or power. Just because he thought I seemed interesting and wanted to know more. Felt hopeful. Monica poked her head in. So, the librarian? We're getting coffee. That's good. He seems nice. And more importantly, he knew you when you had nothing to offer except conversation. I wasn't actually dying, Monica. I still had billions. But he didn't know that. All he knew was that you were someone who appreciated good books and intelligent conversation. That's a much better foundation than what you had with Julian. She was right. With Julian, everything had been built on my wealth and status. With Adrian, it was built on nothing but shared interests and genuine connection. Over the next few months, Adrian and I became friends. We met for coffee, then dinner, then long walks through the city. He introduced me to obscure authors and independent bookstores. I introduced him to the foundation and the work we were doing. He never asked about my money. Never suggested expensive restaurants or activities. When we went out, we split the bill or took turns paying. It was refreshingly normal. Why don't you ask? I finally said one day about 4 months into our friendship. Ask what? About the money. The company. How much I'm worth. Everyone always wants to know. He shrugged. I know you're successful. I know you built something impressive. The specific numbers don't really matter to me. I'm more interested in what you're doing now with the foundation, how you're helping people. It was such a simple answer, but it meant everything. 1 year after Julian's sentencing, the foundation held its annual gala. We'd helped over 200 victims get justice, prevented an estimated 50 million in fraud, and created educational programs that reached thousands of people. I stood on the stage looking out at the crowd, donors, victims, advocates, supporters. Monica stood beside me, along with Catherine and the foundation's leadership team. A year ago, I began, I was sitting in a courtroom watching my ex-husband be sentenced for trying to steal my fortune. It was supposed to be a victory. And it was. But it was also an ending. The end of a relationship, the end of a scheme, the end of a dark chapter in my life. I paused, letting my eyes sweep across the audience. I saw Adrian in the crowd, smiling encouragingly. But endings are also beginnings. This foundation was born from betrayal and pain, but it exists because of hope and determination. Hope that we can make a difference. Determination to protect others from the kind of exploitation I experienced. I went on to outline our achievements, our goals, our vision for the future. The crowd applauded at the right moments, donated generously, committed to supporting our mission. After the gala, Adrian walked me home. We'd been doing this often. Long walks where we talked about everything and nothing, where I could just be myself without the weight of expectations or suspicions. You were brilliant tonight, he said. It was a good night. We raised enough to expand into 3 more cities. That's amazing. But I meant you were brilliant. The way you've turned something so painful into something so positive. That takes real strength. We stopped at my building. The doorman nodded at us, familiar with Adrian's presence by now. Do you want to come up? I asked. Just for coffee. Or tea. Or conversation. He smiled. I'd like that. As we rode the elevator up to my penthouse, I realized something. I was happy. Genuinely, completely happy. Not because I'd gotten revenge on Julian. That was just justice. Not because my foundation was successful, though that was deeply satisfying. I was happy because I'd rebuilt myself. Because I'd taken the broken pieces of my trust and my heart and created something stronger. Because I'd found people like Monica and Adrian who valued me for who I was, not what I had. The elevator opened to my floor and we walked into my apartment. Adrian had been here before, but he still looked around with appreciation at the art, the books, the view of the city. You know what I love about your place? He said. What? It looks lived in. Like an actual person lives here, not just a billionaire. I laughed. I am an actual person who happens to be a billionaire. Exactly my point. We made coffee and sat on the balcony looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Julian was in prison, probably still convinced he'd been wronged. His family was scattered in various federal facilities, paying for their greed. But I wasn't thinking about them anymore. I was thinking about tomorrow's foundation meeting. About the new fraud prevention workshops we were launching. About the dinner Adrian and I had planned for next week. Can I ask you something? Adrian said. Of course. Are you still angry? About what Julian did? I considered the question carefully. No. I was angry. Furious even. But anger is exhausting, and it keeps you tied to the person who hurt you. I'd rather focus on building something positive than dwelling on his negativity. That's very mature. It's very practical. Julian took enough from me, my time, my trust, my peace of mind. I'm not giving him my future too. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, just enjoying the night air and each other's company. I should probably go, Adrian said eventually. Early shift at the library tomorrow. Okay. Same time next week for dinner? Absolutely. I'll pick the restaurant this time. Somewhere that has nothing to do with money or status. Just good food and good company. After he left, I stood on the balcony for a long time thinking about how far I'd come. A year ago, I'd been lying in a hospital bed pretending to die, watching the man I'd planned to marry reveal his true nature. Now I was standing in my home, healthy and strong, with a foundation that was changing lives and a friendship that might become something more. Julian had tried to destroy me for my money. Instead, he'd freed me to discover what really mattered. And what mattered wasn't wealth or power or revenge. It was purpose, connection, and the courage to remain open to goodness even after experiencing evil. I went to bed that night with a smile on my face, excited for tomorrow. Not because of any grand plans or ambitious goals, but because tomorrow was just another day to build the life I deserved. A life built on truth instead of lies. On genuine connection instead of manipulation. On strength instead of victimhood. Gabrielle Laurent had been tested by fire and emerged stronger than ever. And the best part was the story wasn't over. It was just beginning.